all very sad at The Tonight Show to hear about the passing of our friend and entertainment legend, Rob Reiner, and his wife, Michelle Reiner.
People expect bad news in Hollywood to arrive with noise, sirens, headlines, a sudden flood of reactions. But this didn't arrive like that.
Rob was like a father to me.
It arrived quietly.
It's just not fair.
In hushed voices backstage.
Rob changed the course of my life.
In pauses that stretched too long on live television.
Rob Reiner, he was the one who gave me my big break when I was a kid for the soundtrack to When Harry Met Sally.
In faces that suddenly went blank, as if the words being spoken didn't make sense yet.
Everything I have is because of Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner was a name everyone knew, a voice people trusted, a presence that felt steady, familiar, and warm. So when the news began to spread, it didn't feel real. It felt like a mistake, something that would be corrected any second.
Rob Reiner, I just interviewed him.
Oh, God. Did you just interview him?
Just
Really?
did him on for the sequel to Spinal Tap. We had a great interview because I'm obsessed with Spinal Tap. I just sat there screaming Spinal Tap lines to him.
Yeah,
He was
really?
like, it's enough already.
Right, yeah. Oh, God. What a great guy.
He was,
Incredible.
So sad. Only weeks earlier, Rob had been sitting across from an interviewer, smiling easily, talking about returning to one of the most beloved films of his career. He laughed about old lines. He leaned back in his chair, relaxed, enjoying the memories. He spoke like someone who still loved the audience and still loved making things for them. No one watching that conversation could have imagined it would be one of his last. As the news reached studios and sets, the reactions were immediate but unpolished. Hosts struggled to get through their sentences, guests put their heads down. Some couldn't continue at all. The same word kept coming up again and again: shock. People didn't talk first about his achievements, they talked about who he was.
His kindness and words of wisdom have stayed with me to this day.
They talked about his kindness, his patience, the way he made others feel safe and seen. One person after another described how Rob changed their life, sometimes without even realizing it. A phone call, a chance, a quiet moment of encouragement that stayed with them for decades. Many said they wouldn't be where they were without him. Some met him when they were children, others were given their first real opportunity because Rob believed in them. To them, he wasn't just a director or producer, he was family. The loss felt even heavier, knowing that his wife, Michelle, was gone as well. The idea that both of them were no longer there felt impossible to understand. Friends spoke about calling Rob's number without thinking, then realizing too late what had happened. Others described driving around with nowhere to go, trying to wrap their minds around it. At the same time, questions began to form, not just from the public, but from those closest to him. How could something like this happen? How did things unravel so completely, so suddenly? The more people tried to understand, the more unsettled they felt.
When I look back over the last 35 years since we made Misery, I realized that if I hadn't done Misery, it would be like George Bailey going back and seeing what his life would have been like if he had never been there.
Still, many made the same choice. They chose to remember Rob as he lived, laughing, creating, quoting absurd lines just to make people smile. He loved being part of an audience, and he loved making things for one. That joy never felt forced. It was who he was. Rob Reiner didn't just make films, he shaped memories. And for the people who loved him, that's the version they're holding on to now. As the initial shock settled in, the entertainment world began doing what it always does in moments like this. It started telling stories, not the polished kind meant for awards shows, but the small ones, the personal ones. The memories people hold on to when they are trying to understand why someone mattered so much.
Rob was my oldest friend. It's that simple. He's the person that I've known the longest. Met him when I was 14 years old. So I'm still in that not believing it stage. I know it happened, but I'm driving around and all of a sudden I actually 2 days ago, I called his number.
People spoke about meeting Rob for the first time and feeling immediately at ease. He didn't act like a legend. He didn't talk down to anyone. He listened. He remembered names. He followed up weeks or even years later. For many, that alone made him different. One longtime collaborator described Rob as the person he had known the longest in his life. Another admitted he was still in disbelief, even days later finding himself almost dialing Rob's number out of habit. That kind of reaction doesn't come from fame. It comes from closeness, from shared history that runs deeper than work. Rob's influence stretched across generations. From classic television to unforgettable films, his work wasn't just watched, it was shared. Families quoted his movies at dinner tables, friends bonded over scenes they had memorized word for word.
In September, I sat down with him as he was out promoting a sequel to his groundbreaking mockumentary, This Is Spinal Tap. What he didn't know when he sat down with me is that in 1984, when the film came out, I went to see it in theaters, and I have seen it dozens of times since then. I'm a huge Spinal Tap fan, and that's what I talked to Rob about.
His stories became part of people's lives in quiet but lasting ways. One moment that kept resurfacing involved his love for humor that didn't need to explain itself. He once joked about a famous line from one of his films appearing at a real-world landmark, credited not to philosophers or scientists, but to a fictional rock musician. That detail made him laugh every time he told it. It summed him up perfectly. Clever, playful, and deeply aware of how culture connects people. In recent years, Rob was still working, still showing up, still excited about ideas. When he sat down to talk about revisiting an old project, his energy hadn't faded. He spoke with the same enthusiasm as someone just starting out. That's what made the situation even harder to accept. There was no sense of closure, no slow goodbye. As conversations continued on television and online, many tried to avoid focusing on the circumstances and instead centered on the impact. What Rob gave to others, what he built, what he left behind. Because focusing too much on the unanswered questions felt overwhelming.
Okay, so if you go to Stonehenge, there's an educational center, and they have quotes up there, philosophers, poets, scientists, and up there it says, no one knows who they were or what they were doing. Nigel Tufnell, rock musician. It's right up there.
It's amazing.
At the same time, tension began to rise around how the story was being discussed publicly. Some statements felt careless, others felt cruel. People close to Rob pushed back, reminding everyone that behind headlines were real people, real families, and real grief. They asked for decency, for restraint, for humanity. More than anything, there was a shared feeling of loss within the creative community. This wasn't just about losing a well-known figure. It was about losing a presence that made rooms feel lighter. Someone who believed stories mattered. Someone who believed laughter could bring people together. And as the days passed, one truth became clear. Rob Reiner's absence left a space that couldn't be filled, not because of what he achieved, but because of how he made people feel while doing it. As tributes continued, the tone around Rob, Reiner's legacy began to shift. The first wave had been disbelief. The second was remembrance. Now came something harder, reflection. People started looking back not just at what Rob made, but at the choices he made as a person, especially during difficult moments.
You know, he loved being an audience, and he loved making things for an audience. And he was just a person who was so full of love.
Rob was a frequent guest here on the show, and everyone here would line up around his dressing room to say hi or tell him something that they loved. I mean, what he's given to the world through his art, from All in the Family to going to direct some great movies like Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, When Harry Met Sally, Spinal Tap, producing Seinfeld. Everyone felt like they had a personal connection to Rob Reiner and his work.
Those who worked closely with him described someone who never stayed quiet when he felt something mattered. He had strong opinions. He spoke his mind. But even when people disagreed with him, they often respected where it came from. Rob believed deeply in standing up for what he thought was right, even if it made things uncomfortable. That part of him became a topic of public debate almost immediately. Some voices tried to reduce his life to a few loud arguments or political moments. Others pushed back hard, saying that doing so missed the point entirely. To them, Rob was not defined by headlines or arguments. He was defined by decades of generosity, mentorship, and creative risk. Several friends spoke out to defend his character, saying Rob and Michelle were thoughtful, principled people who cared deeply about others. They reminded audiences that it's easy to speak harshly when emotions are running high, but harder to show compassion when it matters most. Behind the scenes, the mood remained heavy. Casts and crews struggled to focus. Some shows addressed the situation directly. Others chose silence, unsure how to speak without making things worse. Many admitted they simply didn't have the words yet. At the same time, new information began to surface about what had been happening privately.
I had Rob here on the show for the first time a couple months ago, and I could have talked to him for hours about his work, about his career. You know, he loved being an audience, and he loved making things for an audience.
It became clear that this was not a simple story with clean answers. There were signs of long-term struggles, complex challenges, and warning signals that, in hindsight, felt impossible to ignore. Sources close to the situation described behavior in the weeks leading up to the incident that raised concern, actions that felt unpredictable, moments that caused fear rather than comfort. It painted a Picture not of one sudden moment, but of a situation that had been building quietly. This added another layer to the grief, not just sadness, but confusion, the kind that makes people ask if anything could have been done differently, the kind that doesn't lead to easy conclusions. Public attention soon turned to the legal process ahead. It was confirmed that responsibility would be challenged based on mental health grounds. That detail sparked intense discussion. Some reacted with anger, others with sorrow, many with both at the same time. What nearly everyone agreed on was this: the situation was deeply complicated, and reducing it to simple labels helped no one. Behind every detail were real people who were now gone, and others who would carry the weight of what happened for the rest of their lives. As the noise continued online, those who truly knew Rob kept coming back to the same idea. He should be remembered for how he lived, not for the chaos that followed, for the joy he gave, the chances he took on people, the laughter he created, because in the end, that is what lasts. Not the confusion, not the arguments, but the impact. As the public conversation grew louder, many people close to Rob Reiner chose to step back from the noise. Not because they didn't care, but because the constant analysis began to feel overwhelming. Grief does not move at the speed of social media, and this situation demanded more patience than the internet usually allows. Behind the scenes, friends gathered quietly, not for cameras, not for statements, but to sit together and remember. They talked about long lunches that turned into entire afternoons, about jokes that never made it into movies but were shared on set, about Rob's habit of checking in on people long after a project ended, just to ask how they were doing. One recurring memory stood out. Rob loved being part of the audience. Even after everything he had achieved, he never lost that sense of wonder. He laughed, easily. He applauded loudly. He genuinely enjoyed watching others succeed. That joy was not an act. It was natural to him. Many also remembered how welcoming he was. When Rob entered a building, people noticed, not because of ego, but because he made time. Crew members, assistants, new faces. No one felt invisible around him. That mattered more than awards or box office numbers. As shows and networks decided how to address the situation, there was a shared struggle to strike the right tone. Say too little, and it felt cold. Say too much, and it risked turning something deeply personal into spectacle. Several hosts admitted openly that they were unsure how to proceed, choosing honesty over polish. At the same time, conversations about safety, responsibility, and mental health became impossible to ignore. While no one claimed to have simple answers, many agreed that ignoring warning signs in any situation can lead to tragic outcomes. That realization added another layer of heaviness to an already difficult moment. Still, those closest to Rob asked for something very specific from the public. Remember him fully, not as a headline, not as a controversy, but as a human being who gave more than he took, who believed stories could bring people together, who used humor not to distract but to connect. In quiet moments, people returned to his work. They rewatched scenes, quoted lines, shared clips with friends, laughter mixed with tears, and that felt right. Rob would have wanted it that way. He believed laughter mattered, especially when things felt dark. There was also gratitude. Gratitude that he had lived a full life. Gratitude that he had created so much joy. Gratitude that his work would continue to be discovered by new generations who might not know his name yet, but would feel his impact anyway. As the days passed, one thing became clearer. While the circumstances surrounding his absence raised painful questions, they did not erase the decades of meaning he brought into the world. Those contributions stood on their own, and for those who loved him, that was where the focus remained, on what he built, on what he shared, on how he made people feel. As time continues to move forward, the noise slowly fades. The headlines change, the conversations shift. But for those who truly knew Rob Reiner, the impact does not disappear. It settles into something quieter and more permanent. What remains is not confusion, not argument, and not speculation. What remains are the moments, the laughter on set, the encouragement given when it mattered most, the way Rob made people feel like they belonged, even when they were just starting out. Many have said the same thing in different ways. Rob believed in people before they believed in themselves. He gave chances, he took risks, and he never acted like success made him more important than anyone else in the room. That humility stayed with him for his entire life. His work continues to speak for itself. Stories about friendship, love, courage, growing up, standing up, letting go. These stories didn't just entertain, they connected people across generations. They became shared language, shared comfort, shared joy. In moments of reflection, some have pointed out how rare that is, to create work that lasts not because it chases trends, but because it understands people. Rob understood people. their flaws, their humor, their need to be seen, that understanding shaped everything he made. There is also a deeper lesson in how this story unfolded, one that many are still grappling with. It reminds us that behind even the most familiar faces are private struggles we may never fully see. It reminds us to pay attention, to take concerns seriously, and to approach difficult situations with care rather than judgment. But above all, it reminds us to lead with compassion, because compassion is what Rob practiced throughout his life. Not perfectly, but sincerely. He showed up, he listened, he cared. As friends, colleagues, and fans continue to process this loss, many have chosen the same path. They return to the work, they laugh again, they share stories with their children and friends, they let the joy exist alongside the sadness. That balance feels appropriate, because Rob's life was full of creativity, full of connection, full of love for the audience and love for the people around him. In the end, that is how he will be remembered. Not by the final chapter, but by the many chapters that came before it. Chapters filled with humor, heart, and humanity. Rob Reiner gave the world something lasting. And long after the conversations end, that gift remains.